Nah. The notification came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and by 11:49 p.m., I was standing in the driveway in my pajamas with a garbage bag of my belongings hitting the concrete beside me. 2 minutes. That's all it took for my mother to decide I was a criminal. But before I tell you what my father found inside my brother's laptop that unraveled 17 years of lies in under 4 minutes, I need you to understand something. I wasn't surprised. And that's the most heartbreaking part of this entire story. My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old. I work as a junior architect at a firm in Portland, Oregon. And until 8 months ago, I believed that the way my family treated me was simply how families worked. I thought the cold silences at dinner were normal. I thought being excluded from the group photo at my cousin's wedding was an oversight. I thought my mother's eyes going soft and warm only when my brother walked into a room and going flat and distant the moment she looked at me was just her personality. I had spent 28 years normalizing cruelty so thoroughly that I had lost the ability to recognize it as cruelty at all. My brother's name is Derek. He's 31. He has never held a job for longer than 14 months, and every single time he's been let go, my mother has found a way to make it someone else's fault. The economy. A jealous coworker. A boss who didn't recognize talent. Derek has a gift, she would say, pressing her hand over her heart like she was reciting a prayer. He just needs the right opportunity. The right opportunity, it turned out, was me. 3 months before the night in the driveway, our grandfather passed away. Grandpa Roy had been a quiet man, a retired civil engineer who smelled like cedar and black coffee and always slipped $20 bills into birthday cards with a small note that said, "Keep building." He left behind a modest estate, a house in Bend that sold for just under $400,000, some savings, and a specific handwritten addendum to his will. The addendum left $60,000 directly to me. Not to the family, not split between Derek and me. To me, specifically, because Grandpa Roy had watched me study through holidays and work 2 jobs through college and earned a graduate scholarship, I almost didn't accept because I couldn't afford the living expenses. He had written in the margin of that addendum, in his slow, careful handwriting, for Claire's firm. She'll build something real. My mother smiled at the reading. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind that means the conversation isn't over, it's just being relocated. I didn't touch the money immediately. It sat in a dedicated account while I researched what it would cost to open a small, independent practice within 2 years. I had a business plan. I had 2 potential partners from graduate school. I had spreadsheets with projected costs and timelines organized by quarter. I had worked on that plan for 11 months, updating it every time something changed. The way you tend a garden you're not sure will survive the winter, but you tend it anyway because you believe in what it could become. Derek knew about the money. Of course he did. In our family, my mother knew everything about me, and Derek knew everything my mother knew. What I didn't know was that Derek had debt. Not the ordinary kind of debt that comes from bad luck or medical bills or a single desperate decision. The compounding, intentional kind. Online gambling. A personal loan taken out in our father's name without his knowledge. 2 credit cards opened and maxed and ignored until they became collection calls. My mother intercepted and explained away as billing errors. The total, I would later learn, was just over $58,000. The number was not a coincidence. On the Tuesday night, everything collapsed. I had driven down from Portland to have dinner with my parents. My father had called that morning just to catch up, and he'd mentioned that my mother had made pot roast, and there had been something in his voice, a kind of careful hopefulness that made me say yes even though I had an early meeting the next day. My father does that sometimes. He reaches out with small, ordinary things because he doesn't know how to say, "I miss you," or "something feels wrong here," or "I'm sorry for what she does and for the fact that I haven't stopped it." He just says, "Your mother made pot roast." And I understand. Dinner was fine. Fine the way a held breath is fine. Derek was there with his girlfriend, Amber, who laughed too loudly at everything he said and watched my mother with the particular attentiveness of someone trying to learn the rules of a game they haven't been told they're playing. I helped clear the table. I asked my father about the bird feeder he'd been building in the garage. I did not let myself want anything from the meal except to get through it without incident. I was loading the dishwasher when I heard Derek's voice from the living room change register. That's the only way I can describe it. It dropped and sharpened the way a voice does when someone has decided to say the thing they've been rehearsing. "Mom," he said, "I need to show you something." I didn't move. I stood with a plate in my hand and I listened. "I was using Claire's laptop last week while mine was being repaired," he said. I heard my mother make a small sound of attention, and I accidentally saw her banking app. I wasn't snooping, it was just open. The plate was very cold in my hands. "The inheritance account," he said. "It's gone. The 60,000. All of it." My mother's voice, very quiet. "What do you mean, gone?" "Transferred out. 3 weeks ago. Into some account I've never seen. Mom, I think she's hiding it. I think she moved it so she wouldn't have to share it with the family. Grandpa would have wanted us all to." I walked into the living room. "That's not true," I said. Every head turned. My mother looked at me the way she has looked at me my entire life, like I was an interruption, like I was a problem she kept having to solve. "Derek was never on my laptop," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that, the steadiness, because underneath it something was cracking open. "I don't know what he showed you, but I haven't moved that money. It's in the same account it's been in since the estate settled." "Claire." My mother said my name the way you say enough. "Your grandfather trusted this family. He trusted all of us. He left it to me," I said. "Specifically, to me." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. My father was standing in the doorway from the kitchen. I saw him look at Derek. I saw Derek look at his phone. "I have screenshots," Derek said, holding it out to my mother. "Not to me, to her. The transfer records, the amount, the date." My mother looked at the screen for 3 seconds. She did not look at me. She stood up, and the expression on her face was not anger. It was something older and colder than anger. It was relief, like she'd been waiting for a reason and now she finally had one. "I want you out of this house," she said. "Mom, I haven't done anything." I said, "Get out, Claire." Her voice didn't rise. "That was worse. You took money that should have been a gift to this family. Your grandfather is barely in the ground and you are already—" "He left it to me. You were at the reading. You heard the attorney, 'Get out.'" My father took 1 step forward. My mother turned and looked at him, and he stopped. He stopped, and I watched him stop, and that was its own particular kind of devastation that I have carried every day since. I went upstairs. I put what I could into the overnight bag I'd brought and the garbage bag I pulled from under the bathroom sink. I was methodical. I didn't cry. I had learned very young that crying in front of my mother gave her something she wanted. So I had trained myself out of it, the way you train yourself out of flinching. I put the bags on the driveway. I stood next to them in the November cold. The porch light was on, but the front door was closed. I called my father. He picked up on the second ring. Through the phone, I could hear my mother's voice somewhere behind him, still talking, still building her case. He said my name once, quietly, and in the way he said it, I could hear him choosing. I could hear the exact moment of choosing. "Stay there," he said. "Don't go anywhere." He came outside 11 minutes later. He had his car keys and his reading glasses and the expression of a man who has been patient for a very long time and has now reached the absolute end of patience. "What did he show her?" my father asked. "I don't know," I said. "Fabricated screenshots, I assume. Or something real that he doctored. Derek is smart about things like that when he wants to be." My father nodded slowly. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the house. "Come inside," he said. "She told me to leave. I know what she said." He picked up the garbage bag from the driveway. "Come inside." I have thought about that moment many times since. My father picking up that garbage bag in the dark, at 61 years old, in his house slippers. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic the way it might be in a movie. It was just a tired man refusing, very quietly, to let one more wrong thing happen. Sometimes that's what love looks like. Not the grand gesture, just someone picking up your garbage bag and walking back toward the door. My mother was in the living room. Derek and Amber were still on the couch. My father walked past all of them without speaking and went directly to the home office at the end of the hall, and I followed him and he closed the door. Derek's laptop? He said. Where does he keep it when he's here? Usually in the guest room. The one he stays in when? My father was already walking. He knocked once on the guest room door, opened it, and turned on the light. The laptop was on the bed. It was open, sleeping, the little light on the corner pulsing slowly. Derek appeared in the hallway behind us. Dad, that's my personal property. I pay the Wi-Fi, my father said, lifting the laptop, and I need to understand what is happening in my house. You have no right. Go sit down, Derek. Something in my father's voice closed the conversation. Derek stood in the doorway, his jaw tight, and then he stepped back. My father sat on the edge of the bed with the laptop. He's not a tech person. He's a man who still prints out his emails and writes checks for the water bill, but he knew enough to open the browser history. And Derek, it turned out, had been careless. Or maybe he had just never expected my father to look. The first thing my father found was a website, a freelance digital editing forum. The browser history showed 3 visits in the past 2 weeks and a search query that was still sitting in the search bar of the last open tab: how to make bank transfer records look real. My father stared at the screen for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He just turned the laptop around so I could see. Dad. Derek had reappeared in the doorway. His voice had changed. The rehearsed quality was gone. Dad, I can explain that. I was helping a friend who thought he was being scammed. I was just trying to... My father held up one hand. He turned back to the laptop. He opened the downloads folder. There were 11 files. Most of them were images. He opened the most recently modified one. It was a screenshot of a banking interface. My name at the top. My account number, partially obscured. And a transfer record. $60,000. Sent to an account labeled only with a number. It was nearly perfect. The font was right. The formatting was right. The small Chase logo in the corner was right. What wasn't right was the date format. Whoever had made it had used MMB-YY in the transaction line, but DDMM7YYIY in the timestamp at the bottom. A small error. The kind you make when you're working fast and you're not a professional and you think no one is going to look that closely. My father looked that closely. He set the laptop down on the bed and stood up. He's 6 feet tall and he doesn't carry himself like a tall man usually. He spent 30 years making himself smaller in rooms, agreeable, accommodating. But he was carrying himself differently now. He walked out of the guest room and down the hall and into the living room, and the way he walked made Amber stand up from the couch without being asked. My mother started speaking before he reached the room. Robert, I don't know what you think you found, but Derek was trying to protect this family, Patricia. My father set the laptop on the coffee table and turned it to face her. Look at the date. She looked. She frowned. I don't understand what the timestamp at the bottom, he said. It's a different format than the transaction line. Because 2 different people made 2 different parts of this image. It's fabricated. My mother's expression moved through several things quickly. Confusion. Recognition. Something that might have been the beginning of shame, but it didn't take hold. Instead, her jaw set, and she straightened, and she said, Derek wouldn't do this without a reason. If he felt he needed to. He stole from us, my father said. I think that's the reason. The room went very still. My father opened the browser on the laptop to the search history and turned it back toward her. Then he went to the downloads folder and opened the edited screenshot again. He didn't make a speech. He didn't list grievances. He just showed her the evidence piece by piece with the patience of someone who has been waiting a long time to finally have something he could point to that couldn't be argued away. You fabricated transfer records, my father said to Derek, Because you needed to discredit Claire before someone noticed what you actually did with that money. Derek said nothing. Amber had gone very quiet by the door. Check your joint account, my father said to my mother. The one you set up for Derek 2 years ago when he said he was starting a business. My mother looked at her phone. She opened the banking app. She stood there for almost 30 seconds reading something on the screen that none of the rest of us could see. And in those 30 seconds, I watched her face do something I had never seen it do in 28 years. It collapsed. Not into tears. Into something quieter and more absolute. The particular collapse of a person discovering that the story they have been defending, the story that organized their entire sense of what was true and who was good and who deserved what, was not the story that had actually been happening. Derek had been siphoning from the joint account for 14 months. Small amounts, irregular intervals, totaling just over $22,000. He had done it carefully enough that she hadn't noticed, or had allowed herself not to notice, or had seen something in the numbers that confused her and chosen not to investigate because investigating might have led somewhere she didn't want to go. I needed to cover the gap, Derek said. His voice was different now, smaller. Before the inheritance came through, I was going to pay it back. With my $60,000, I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer. That's why you needed me discredited first, I said. If I went to Dad before you could access the account, if I told them what I knew, you didn't know anything. I knew you'd been asking Mom about the inheritance timeline, I said, 3 times in the past month. I thought you were just being Derek. I didn't think you were building a plan around it. My father sat down on the arm of the chair near the fireplace. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He looked tired in the particular way of a person who has been seeing something for a long time and finally has to stop pretending they haven't seen it. How much total? He asked Derek. Derek's number, when it came, was $58,400. Across 4 different sources, the joint account, a credit card in my father's name, opened during a period when Derek had access to the filing cabinet where my father kept his documents. A personal loan from a friend of my mother's that my mother had quietly been covering the interest on without telling my father, and approximately $9,000 in small cash withdrawals taken from the emergency fund my parents kept in a fireproof lockbox in the closet, which Derek knew about because my mother had shown it to him during a period when she was worried about her health and wanted him to know where things were. My mother had known about some of it. Not all of it, but some. She had known about the personal loan. She had thought it was a one-time thing. She had told herself it was a one-time thing, and she had paid the interest every month for 10 months out of her personal account, the account that was technically hers from a small inheritance she'd received from her own mother. And she had not told my father because she believed that protecting Derek from consequences was the same as protecting Derek. I had stood outside in the November cold for 22 minutes with a garbage bag at my feet. For a lie she had watched being built and had chosen not to examine too closely. I didn't say that. I didn't need to. My father said it for me, quietly, without heat. You watched her standing on the driveway, Patricia. You watched her and you poured tea. My mother sat down. What happened over the next hour was not dramatic in the way the movies would want it to be. There was no screaming. My father is not a screamer. He made phone calls. He called the attorney who had handled my grandfather's estate to discuss the fabricated financial documents. He called Derek's friend's mother, the one who had made the personal loan, and told her directly what had happened and that she would be repaid in full. He opened the filing cabinet in the home office and spent 40 minutes going through documents with the methodical focus of a man who has realized he needs to understand exactly what has been done in his name. Amber left somewhere during the phone calls. She touched Derek's shoulder on the way out and he didn't look up. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea I wasn't drinking and listened to the house recalibrate. My mother came into the kitchen sometime around 1 in the morning. She stood near the counter and didn't look at me directly, which was, I realized, the same way she had always stood near me. Slightly angled away, as if full eye contact might require her to see something she preferred to keep peripheral. I didn't know about the fake documents, she said. I know, I said, and I did believe that. I believed she hadn't known about the edited screenshots. What she had known was older and larger and harder to name. I thought he just needed more time, she said. Derek has always needed more time than you. You were always. She stopped. Always what? She didn't answer. But I knew the word. Fine. I had always been fine. I had always managed. I had always figured it out, and because I always figured it out, and he received less of everything. Less worry, less attention, less advocacy, less benefit of the doubt. The child who survives without being rescued stops being seen as a child who might need rescuing. The child who manages becomes the one you don't have to think about. And slowly, over years, not being thought about becomes being the one you can think badly of without guilt. Because they're fine. They always land on their feet. It won't really hurt them. It had hurt me. It had hurt me for 28 years, in ways I was only beginning to have language for. I need you to hear something, I said. Not as an accusation, just as a fact. She waited. When I was standing on that driveway tonight, I wasn't angry, I was relieved, because I thought, finally, there is something concrete. Finally, there is something that cannot be explained away. And that's not a feeling a daughter should have standing in the cold outside her mother's house. That's the feeling of someone who has been waiting 28 years for someone to believe them. My mother pressed her lips together. A muscle in her jaw moved. I'm not telling you this, so you'll apologize, I said. I don't need an apology tonight. I'm telling you because I think you need to know what it cost. I finished the tea I hadn't been drinking and went upstairs to the bedroom that still had my old track ribbons on the wall, and I slept for 5 hours and dreamed of nothing. In the morning, my father made eggs. He didn't talk about the night before in a processing way. Didn't ask me how I was feeling or what I needed, because my father shows love in eggs and in presents and in picking up garbage bags without being asked. He cooked and I sat at the counter and we talked about the bird feeder and about a building in Portland I'd been working on that had an interesting load-bearing problem, and it was the most ordinary conversation we had ever had, and it was the best conversation I can remember. Derek left that day to stay with a friend. The legal matters took several months to untangle. The fabricated documents were enough to create serious problems for him. My father recovered what he could through the attorney. The full amount of my inheritance was confirmed untouched and remains exactly where Grandpa Roy intended it to be. My mother and I have spoken 11 times since that night. The conversations are short and careful and nothing like the easy warmth that I used to watch her give Derek so effortlessly. But they are honest in a way our conversations never were before. There is a different quality of silence between us now. Less performance in it. Less pretense. I think that might be the beginning of something. I'm not certain. I'm not in a hurry. What I know is this. I came home that night for pot roast and I left with the first honest accounting of my family that I had ever been given. I lost a version of my family that was never really true. I kept my father. I kept the $60,000 that my grandfather saved and earmarked for the firm I am still building. Slowly, the way he built things, with careful measurements and the patience of someone who believes in what a structure can become. On the wall above my drafting table, I've tacked a small note. It's not his handwriting. I wrote it myself from memory because I know exactly what it said. Keep building. And so, I am.